When Jungkook finally breaks his silence about the night everything shattered with Jimin, the truth unravels with every tear he sheds raw, haunting, unforgettable. "Don't you dare walk away from me, Jimin." The sound cracked through the empty studio like thunder. Mirrors trembled. The silence that followed was even louder, oppressive, suffocating, and deadly still. Jungkook's chest rose and fell rapidly. Fists clenched at his sides, veins throbbing in his neck, like they could burst from the pressure of everything left unsaid. Jimin stood frozen near the door, back turned, his reflection in the mirror betraying the storm swirling beneath his carefully still posture. Neither of them spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then, slowly, Jimin's hand hovered over the handle but didn't push it down. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper, broken but still burning. "If you walk out now, everything changes." Jimin didn't answer, and when the door clicked shut behind him, the only sound that followed was the soft thud of Jungkook's knees hitting the floor. That was 6 months ago. Now, Jungkook sat in the dimly lit corner of a recording booth, facing a camera, the red light blinking steadily like a metronome measuring the rhythm of a confession he was still afraid to make. A lone producer sat behind the glass, watching him silently. The room was too cold, the silence too sharp. Jungkook's fingers trembled as he reached for the mic. Then he looked straight into the camera lens, like he wasn't speaking to the world, but to just one person. "I said things I shouldn't have, but the worst part is, I meant them." His voice cracked, and he immediately flinched at the sound of his own honesty. He rubbed his face, trying to swallow the emotions back down, but it was too late. A single tear slipped down his cheek. "You ever say something out of pain, not anger?" he asked, voice thick. "Like you're bleeding, and you want someone else to bleed too?" He looked away, as if ashamed, and yet somehow more exposed because of it. The air around him shifted, charged now, brittle like glass about to shatter. The night of the fight had never left him. It lived behind his eyelids. It echoed in the space between notes when he tried to sing. It seeped into the silence after the applause died down. He remembered the way Jimin's face changed when Jungkook said it. That one line, that fatal blow. "You're just a performer. You don't feel anything real anymore." The way Jimin had blinked, like Jungkook had stabbed him instead of just spoken. The way his mouth moved, like he was about to deny it but didn't. "I watched him leave," Jungkook whispered. "And I didn't go after him. I thought if I waited, he'd come back. But he didn't." His hand gripped the armrest of the chair, knuckles white. His other hand wiped at his face. But the tears kept coming, relentless and uninvited. "I hated that he made me feel replaceable. I hated that I depended on him to keep me grounded. And that night, I hated myself more than anything." The producer behind the glass shifted, almost uncomfortably. This wasn't the lighthearted solo promotion footage they'd expected. This was something else entirely. Something raw and bleeding and real. Jungkook breathed in sharply, gathering himself. "There's a moment," he said, eyes distant now, "when silence becomes the loudest thing in the world. When someone you love leaves, not in anger, but in pain, and all you hear is the echo of your own words." He let the silence hang again, this time deliberately. When he spoke again, it was quieter. I think Jimin was already slipping away before that night, and maybe I saw it. Maybe I wanted to stop it, but instead of reaching for him, I threw a match." The memory of the last hug they shared came uninvited. The scent of Jimin's cologne, the way his fingers curled slightly when they pulled apart, like he didn't want to let go, but felt like he had to. "I'm not saying this for sympathy," Jungkook continued. "I'm saying this because maybe the only way forward is through the fire I started." The tears streamed freely now. No sobs, no gasps, just silent surrender. A flood of truth long held back, finally spilling over. And then, just before the camera cut off, he whispered, "I'm sorry." The room stayed still, frozen in the aftermath of words that could never be taken back. Words that left scars. Words that might, someday, also begin to heal. Outside the booth, the sky began to darken. Rain tapped softly against the windows, as if the world itself had begun to cry with him. "Why now, Jungkook?" Jimin's voice cut through the air like a blade, low but shaking with restrained fury. He stood against the far wall of the practice room, arms crossed tightly across his chest, body tense, as though bracing for another blow. His eyes burned with an emotion Jungkook couldn't name. Anger, betrayal, grief. Jungkook swallowed, his throat dry. The same room where they had built songs and dreams now felt like a battlefield, scarred, hostile, waiting for someone to take the first shot. I had to say it. I had to. No, you had to absolve yourself, Jimin snapped. You had to get it out so you could sleep at night. You think a public apology in a documentary erases everything? Jungkook flinched. I didn't do it for the cameras. Didn't you? Jimin stepped closer, his voice rising. You cried into a microphone, and suddenly everyone thinks you're the victim. You knew what that video would do, Jungkook. You knew the fans would start asking where I was, why we weren't seen together, and now I'm the villain who left. I never said that, Jungkook said, his voice hoarse. I never blamed you, but you let them assume it, Jimin shouted. His chest heaved. You didn't stop them. A bitter silence fell between them. Outside, the hallway was dim, the building nearly empty. Their schedules had collided here by accident or fate. Neither of them could tell. It was the first time they had been alone in months, and it wasn't going well. You think this was easy for me? Jungkook finally said, taking a step forward. You think I haven't punished myself every single night since that fight? I didn't sleep for weeks. I couldn't even record without hearing your voice in my head. Jimin shook his head. You're not the only one who bled, Jungkook. The words came quietly, but they hit harder than any shout. Jungkook hesitated. Then, why didn't you call? Jimin laughed bitterly. You made it clear that night. You didn't need me. That's not true. You said I didn't feel anything real. That I was hollow. Jimin's eyes welled with sudden heat. Do you know what it's like hearing that from someone you thought saw you? From someone who promised to always... His voice cracked. He turned his face away, furious at himself for letting it show. Jungkook's hands twitched at his sides. He wanted to reach out. But what if he touched the wound wrong and made it worse? You do feel, Jungkook said quietly. You feel more than anyone I've ever met. That's why it scared me. Jimin's gaze shot back to him. Scared you? I was afraid of losing you, Jungkook admitted, of watching you drift away and not knowing how to stop it. So I lashed out. He paused, and his next words were nearly a whisper. I tried to make you hurt the way I was hurting. Jimin's lips parted, but no sound came. The vulnerability in Jungkook's eyes was too much, too raw. It reminded him of that night after the fight, when he waited outside Jungkook's apartment for 2 hours, phone in hand, just waiting for a message. It never came. I thought about calling you that night, Jimin said softly. 100 times, but every time I picked up the phone, I heard your voice in my head, telling me I didn't matter. Jungkook closed his eyes. I never stopped caring, Jimin. Then why did you let me go? I thought you wanted to be let go? Jimin stepped back, visibly trembling. You don't get to twist this into my fault. I'm not, Jungkook said quickly. I'm trying to be honest. Honesty doesn't fix everything, Jimin snapped. It doesn't rewind time. It doesn't unsay what was said. No, Jungkook admitted, but maybe it's a start. A tense beat passed. Then Jimin exhaled, long and slow. You said something in that interview about lighting a match. Jungkook nodded. Well, Jimin said, his voice low. We're standing in the ashes now. What the hell are we supposed to do with them? Jungkook met his eyes, and something flickered there. Guilt, yes, but also hope. Fragile, shaky, desperate. Maybe we rebuild, he said. Or maybe we just sit here and let ourselves feel the burn. Jimin gave a hollow laugh. I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking you to. Not yet. Jimin looked away, his jaw tight. I'm not who I was back then. Neither am I. They stood in silence again, the old wooden floors creaking beneath their feet as if even the building itself remembered what they'd lost. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Rain began to fall, tapping against the windows in a slow, rhythmic pulse. And then Jimin said the one thing Jungkook didn't expect. Do you remember the night in Busan? Before everything? Jungkook blinked. Of course I do. Jimin's eyes softened for a moment. That was the last time I felt like we were us. Before the stages, before the solo tours, before the pressure turned us into strangers. "You kissed me on the rooftop," Jungkook whispered, voice thick, "and told me not to forget." Jimin didn't respond right away. Then, "I forgot. Or maybe I forced myself to." "I never did." The confession hung heavy in the air. Jungkook stepped closer, cautiously, as though nearing a wild animal that might bolt. He reached out, but his hand hovered mid-air. "Can I?" Jimin didn't speak. He just nodded once, barely perceptible. Jungkook's fingers brushed Jimin's. Lightly, almost afraid. But the contact, small, human, was enough to shatter the last wall. Suddenly, Jimin collapsed into him, burying his face in Jungkook's shoulder. And then, like a dam breaking, the sobs came ugly, guttural, honest. Jungkook held him tight, arms wrapped protectively around him, face buried in Jimin's hair. "I'm sorry," Jungkook whispered again and again. "I'm so sorry." They stood like that for a long time, two broken people clinging to the memory of something whole. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something fragile had begun to mend. Later that night, they sat on the studio floor, side by side, still not saying much. Jimin wiped at his eyes with his sleeve, half laughing. "You really had to cry on camera first?" Jungkook chuckled. "What can I say? I'm dramatic." "Understatement." Jungkook turned to look at him. "We don't have to figure everything out tonight, but maybe we could. Talk. Just talk." Jimin nodded slowly. "No stage, no cameras, just us." "Yeah," Jungkook said. "Just us." And in that moment, as the rain continued to fall and the echoes of their fight began to fade, they began again, not as idols, not as perfect images on screen, but as two flawed, frightened men trying to find their way back to each other. And for the first time in months, there was hope, even if it still hurt. "Are you seriously going to act like that night never happened?" Taehyung's voice echoed down the hallway, sharp, cold, and completely devoid of the warmth that usually defined him. Jungkook stopped in his tracks, just outside the practice room where he'd been trying to clear his head. The words hit like a slap, not because of their volume, but because of the weight behind them. He turned slowly, meeting Taehyung's glare head-on. "You don't know what happened that night. I know enough," Taehyung said, walking forward, closing the space between them with deliberate steps. "I know Jimin walked out of here like he'd been shot. I know you disappeared for days after, and I know that the two of you didn't even look at each other during that last award show. You think I don't already live with that?" Jungkook's voice rose, tight with restraint. "You think I haven't gone over every word 1,000 times in my head?" "I think you're good at crying in front of cameras," Taehyung said flatly. "But I don't know if you're good at taking responsibility." Jungkook's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You want to talk about responsibility?" he said, stepping closer, voice low, now dangerously low. "Where were you when he stopped eating? When he started turning up late, canceling meetings, shutting down mid-conversation? You were too busy building your brand to notice he was slipping." Taehyung's jaw clenched. "Don't you dare pin this on me." "I'm not," Jungkook said. "I'm saying we all let him fall. I was the one who broke him, but none of us were really there." Taehyung looked away for a moment, silent. Then, "He needed you. I needed him too," Jungkook whispered. And suddenly, the rage in Taehyung's eyes dimmed, replaced by something that looked eerily like grief. The hallway stretched between them like a chasm of regret. "You think it's just about that fight?" Taehyung asked quietly. "You think this all started because of one argument?" Jungkook blinked. "What are you talking about?" Taehyung hesitated. "You don't know," he said softly, almost to himself. "He never told you." "Told me what?" But Taehyung shook his head. "It's not my story to tell." Before Jungkook could press further, the door at the end of the hall opened, and Yoongi stepped out. Expression unreadable. "I could hear you two from the control room," he said coolly. "If you're done airing your trauma where staff can hear, maybe go somewhere less public." Neither of them moved. Yoongi sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This isn't going away. And you can't keep pretending like everything's fine for the sake of PR. People aren't stupid. They can feel the cracks." Jungkook took a breath, trying to hold himself together. "He and we talked a few nights ago." Yoongi raised an eyebrow. "Talked? Or apologized?" "Both." "Did you listen?" The question stung more than it should have. Jungkook lowered his eyes. "I tried." Yoongi nodded slowly. "Good. Now try again. Because Trying once after months of silence isn't going to fix what's broken. Jungkook didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat was too tight. Behind them, the distant hum of music played from another room, an unfinished track, haunting and raw. It was Jimin's voice, stripped down, pure, wounded. They all paused for a moment, listening. Taehyung closed his eyes briefly. He still sings like he's bleeding. Yoongi turned and walked away without another word, leaving Jungkook standing alone in the hallway, heart pounding. The air felt heavier than ever. Later that night, Jungkook found himself outside Jimin's apartment. Again, just like that night so many months ago. But this time, he knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder, and then the door opened. Jimin stood there in a hoodie, eyes puffy, mouth drawn into a straight line. His gaze swept over Jungkook slowly, guarded. "You really don't give up, do you?" he asked. Jungkook's voice was a whisper. "Only when it comes to you." "A pause. Come in," Jimin said. "But don't say anything unless it's real." The apartment was dimly lit, the only light coming from the kitchen where a mug of untouched tea sat on the counter. A stack of notebooks lay scattered on the table. Lyrics, half-written verses, scribbled margins with phrases like, "Still can't breathe without you," and "Is the silence safer than the truth?" Jungkook scanned the room, trying to ground himself. Everything smelled like chamomile and something faintly smoky, Jimin's favorite incense. Familiar and distant all at once. "I talked to Taehyung," Jungkook began. Jimin raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He said, "There's something you never told me." Jimin froze. His posture stiffened visibly. "I don't want to push," Jungkook added quickly. I want to understand." Jimin stared at him for a long time. Then, slowly, he walked over to the couch and sat down, pulling a blanket over his lap like armor. "I was going to leave," he said quietly, "even before the fight." Jungkook felt the floor tilt beneath him. "What?" "I had a solo deal lined up, a label in Japan, a contract, a full creative control clause, everything." You were going to go solo?" Jungkook asked, barely breathing. "I didn't sign it," Jimin clarified, "but I thought about it. Every night. Not because I didn't love what we had, but because I didn't know who I was anymore. Not next to you. Not in your shadow." Jungkook sat down across from him, stunned. "You were never in my shadow," he whispered. "But I felt like I was," Jimin said. "Not because of you, at least not entirely, but because the world decided you were the golden one, and I became the echo." Tears welled in his eyes again, but he didn't blink them away. "I needed to know I could exist without being needed by someone else." The room was silent. Just the sound of the tea cooling on the counter, the whir of the fridge. Jungkook leaned forward. "You're not an echo, Jimin. You're the reason the room resonates." Jimin blinked, startled. "I watched you on stage. Every time. You held people in your palm like no one else. You made them feel like they mattered. And I got scared that if you ever realized how powerful you were without me, I'd be nothing." Jimin wiped his eyes roughly. "So you tried to clip my wings?" "No," Jungkook said. "I tried to hold on. And in doing that, I crushed what we had." He got up slowly and walked to the counter, picking up one of the lyric notebooks. "This line," he said, pointing. "I'd rather burn than be invisible." "What did you mean?" Jimin hesitated. "That I'd rather be hated than ignored. That even pain is better than erasure." Jungkook looked down at the page. "You've never been invisible to me, but I was to myself." Jungkook put the notebook down and walked back to him. Knelt. Looked him in the eyes. "Then let's figure it out together. From the ashes, from the fight, from the wreckage. Let's rebuild, not because we have to, but because I want you. Not the performance, not the duet. You." Jimin stared at him, searching for a lie. He didn't find one. "You'll have to be patient with me," he said at last. "I will. And if I need space, you'll give it? I will. And if I fall again, I'll catch you." Jimin closed his eyes, took a breath. When he opened them, he didn't say anything. He just reached forward and took Jungkook's hand gently, deliberately. And in that single gesture, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something like it. A beginning. Again, the hotel room was too quiet. Jimin sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at his phone screen without blinking. A message from the label. Another press release draft. Another, let's shape the narrative before the fans get ahead of us. He hated that phrase. Shape the narrative. It felt like a polite way of saying, lie but prettier this time. He didn't hear the door open, didn't flinch when Jungkook stepped in. Still dressed in the clothes from the photo shoot they'd barely survived together, posed smiles, arms around each other's shoulders. 100 fake moments captured forever. You're not answering your phone, Jungkook said. I know. Jungkook stood there for a second, unsure whether to sit or stay. Then, against his better judgment, he crossed the room and sat next to him. Close, but not touching. Jimin didn't move. I didn't want to come, Jimin said suddenly. The shoot, the hotel, any of it. You didn't have to. Jimin laughed bitterly. You know that's not true. Jungkook, stay. Then Jimin turned to him, eyes sharp. You still don't get it, do you? What? I'm not angry because of the fight anymore, Jungkook. I'm angry because you kept protecting me. Like I'm breakable. Like I'm some soft thing that'll vanish if you press too hard. That's not what I— Yes, it is, Jimin snapped. Every time things got real, you backed off. You apologized, but you never listened. You said you'd give me space, and then you hovered. You said you loved me, but you never asked what I needed. Jungkook opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I needed truth, Jimin continued, not comfort. I needed you to look me in the eye and say, you were right to want more. But instead, you made me feel like wanting more was betrayal. I thought you did betray me, Jungkook said, voice low. When I found out about that solo deal, I couldn't breathe. I thought you were gone. I was gone, Jungkook. Emotionally, spiritually, for months before the contract ever appeared. You just didn't notice. Jungkook winced. And you know the worst part? Jimin added, his voice breaking. I wanted you to notice. I kept waiting for you to ask me why I was pulling away. But you didn't. You just smiled through it. Like if we both pretended long enough, it wouldn't be real. Jungkook looked at him, truly looked at him, and realized for the first time how tired Jimin looked. Not physically, his skin still glowed under the hotel light, his hair artfully messy from the shoot, but soul tired, worn, as though every truth he carried was a stone he'd swallowed. I didn't know how to stop it, Jungkook whispered. I didn't know how to be what you needed. I didn't need you to fix me, Jimin said. I needed you to see me. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Outside, city lights pulsed in the distance. Somewhere below, fans had already started gathering, hopeful for a glimpse. But up here, on the 12th floor, all the flashbulbs had faded. Then Jungkook said, Why didn't you leave? Jimin blinked. That night, Jungkook continued, when everything was at its worst, why didn't you get on the plane? Why didn't you disappear like you said you wanted to? Jimin's throat tightened. He looked down. Because I loved you, he said quietly. Because some part of me thought, if I stayed, you'd follow. Jungkook's heart cracked. I didn't, he whispered. No, Jimin said. You didn't. The silence stretched again, until it snapped. Jungkook stood suddenly, pacing. I wanted to, he said. God, I wanted to. But I didn't know how to be the person you needed without losing myself. And the truth is, I resented you for that. Jimin looked up, startled. I hated that you could be so soft, so open, and still walk through hell like you weren't afraid, Jungkook said, while I was always performing, always waiting for approval. From the fans, the label, the world, even you. He stopped and turned. I didn't follow you that night, because I didn't think I deserved you. Jimin stared at him. And now? Now? Jungkook took a deep breath. Now I know I don't. But I still want you anyway. There it was. Raw, bare, ugly, and beautiful all at once. Jimin stood, slowly. The space between them felt electric. Do you think wanting is enough? No, Jungkook said. But it's where we start. Jimin stepped forward, close enough to feel his breath. You lied to me, he said. I know. You lied to yourself. I know. Jimin's eyes glistened. And I still want you too. God help me. Jungkook didn't move, didn't dare. The weight of what they'd said hung heavy in the air. Then Jimin reached up, his hand trembling, and touched the side of Jungkook's face. Tell me the truth, he said. Jungkook's voice broke. I'm terrified of losing you again. Good, Jimin whispered. Because this time, if you break me, I won't come back. Jungkook nodded slowly, eyes locked on his. "I won't let go," he said. "Then show me." And with that, Jimin leaned in, not a kiss, not yet, but a resting of foreheads, a merging of breath, an intimate, wordless contract written in the heat between them. They stayed like that for minutes, maybe more. The world faded. Only the thunder of each other's hearts remained. Later, as they lay side by side on the hotel bed, not touching, staring at the ceiling in silence, Jimin said, "I got a call from Yoongi." Jungkook turned his head slightly. "Yeah? He wants us to write something. Together. For the anniversary project." Jungkook's pulse quickened. "You said yes?" Jimin smirked faintly. "I said maybe." Jungkook chuckled. "That's progress. Don't get ahead of yourself." "I never do," Jungkook said softly. "Not with you." Jimin didn't answer, but he didn't push him away either. And that night, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Jungkook slept without dreaming of what he'd lost. Because this time, he knew it wasn't over. The studio smelled like burnt coffee and stale perfume. It was too early, 6:42 a.m., but the sun was already up, and Seoul was already alive. Traffic rumbled in the distance, humming beneath the city's concrete heartbeat. Inside the soundproof walls of Big Hit's fourth-floor studio, the tension was so thick it could have strangled a weaker man. Jungkook sat hunched over the piano bench, hoodie over his head, headphones dangling from his neck. He was staring at a blank screen, a demo file open but untouched. The cursor blinked on the timeline like it was daring him to do something, anything. A verse, a chorus, a scream. Behind him, the door slammed open. "You're early," said a voice that made his spine straighten. "Jimin." "Couldn't sleep," Jungkook muttered. "Same." Jimin walked in, his presence like a storm cloud sliding across a glass sky. He didn't look like himself tired, still in his beanie and sweats, but there was a new kind of energy in him. Restless. Dangerous. Jungkook turned to look at him, offering a small smile. It wasn't returned. "Yoongi called me again last night," Jimin said. "He's pushing for the anniversary track to drop with the official comeback announcement." Jungkook nodded. "We don't even have a full chorus yet." "Doesn't matter to them," Jimin said flatly. "They just want a narrative." "Healing after the fracture," Jungkook recited like a script. "Two brothers finding their way back," Jimin snorted. "They make it sound like we were separated by fate, not our own stupid choices." Jungkook looked down. "Maybe it's both." Jimin didn't reply. The silence stretched. Then, "You said something in the hotel," Jimin began. "That you wanted to start with me again. That this time would be different." "I meant it." Jimin raised an eyebrow. "Then why did I get a call this morning from your manager telling me you might go on solo tour next year? Overseas. 12 cities. Jungkook's stomach dropped. "What?" "Don't act surprised," Jimin said sharply. "Either you knew, or your team is making plans behind your back. I didn't sign anything. You didn't tell me anything." "I didn't know I needed to," Jungkook said, standing now. "It's not confirmed. It's just offers." "That's what you said the last time," Jimin snapped. Jungkook flinched. "Don't do that," he said, voice shaking. "Don't turn this into another betrayal." "I'm not turning it into anything." "You are," Jimin shot back. "You said this time would be different. But the moment opportunity comes, you retreat into your own orbit again. Like I'm just some footnote in the biography of your rise. That's not fair, isn't it?" "I'm allowed to have my own path," Jungkook said, voice rising now. "Just like you had yours." "Of course you are," Jimin said. "But you don't get to pretend this is us rebuilding while laying the foundation for your next escape." Jungkook stepped back. It felt like being punched, only slower. "I'm not escaping. You always are." The studio crackled with something unseen, like every old wound was rising from the floorboards, pulling at their ankles, their throats. "Why is it always me who has to bend?" Jungkook said suddenly. "Why do I always have to be the one who slows down, explains myself, apologizes first?" Jimin's mouth dropped open. "I never asked you to do that." "Yes, you did," Jungkook said. "Maybe not with words, but with looks, with silences, with every time you shut down and made me guess what I did wrong." Jimin's fists clenched. "So now I'm manipulating you?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." The door opened. It was Yoongi. He stopped. The second he stepped inside, eyes moving between them. "Okay," he said, setting down his coffee. "Whatever this is, finish it now. Because you've got 45 minutes before the label walks in with PR, and we're still behind." No one moved. Jimin stared at Jungkook. Jungkook stared at the floor. Yoongi looked between them again, then sighed. "I told the company we weren't writing a fairy tale," he said. "I told them this song was supposed to be honest. If you two can't even sit in a room together, then maybe the story's over." That snapped something in Jungkook. "It's not over," he said quickly. "We're just in the middle of it." Yoongi arched an eyebrow. "Then act like it." He walked out again, door slamming behind him. Jimin sat down hard in the chair, staring at the screen. "This is insane," he said. "We're writing about forgiveness, but we can't even talk without fighting. Maybe that's what makes it real." Jimin looked over at him. "I'm tired, Jungkook. I know. I don't know if us survives all this." Jungkook walked over to the piano, sat again, put his fingers on the keys. He played something soft, tentative, a melody he'd been working on but never dared to play for anyone. "I wrote this for you," he said. Jimin's expression didn't change, but his jaw twitched. "It's not polished," Jungkook added. "It's not even structured, but it's how I felt the night you walked out." He played. The melody was jagged, hesitant. Notes that didn't belong next to each other but somehow worked. A sound like memory, like regret. When he finished, he looked up. Jimin's eyes were glassy, but his voice was flat. "Do you think music fixes everything?" "No," Jungkook said. "But it's the only way I know how to tell the truth." Jimin nodded slowly, then stood, walked to the mic, put the headphones on. "You play," he said. "I'll try something." And so they did. Jungkook played. Jimin sang. Freestyle. Raw. Lyrics that weren't pre-written or polished by corporate hands. "If I burn, will you hold my ashes? If I drown, will you breathe me back to life? You say you never meant to let go, but I'm still standing in the place you left me." They worked through the next few hours like possessed men. Yoongi returned, listened in silence, made no comments. PR never came in. The sun dipped below the horizon. A new song was born. Later that night, after the final playback, Jimin sat beside Jungkook again. Both of them, exhausted, empty. "That line you sang," Jimin murmured, "about the place I left you?" "I never left," Jungkook whispered. Jimin looked over at him, the light from the console reflecting in his eyes. "You just didn't know how to follow." Jungkook nodded. "Maybe now I do." Jimin didn't answer. He stood slowly and walked to the door. Before he opened it, he said, "We've still got a long way to go." "I know," Jungkook said, "but I'll walk it, as long as you're beside me." Jimin didn't turn around. But this time, he didn't walk away.